Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered, is there something I'm doing that makes me look older or less vibrant than I feel inside? We all age, but it's the habits we form along the way that shape how the world sees us, and more importantly, how we see ourselves. In Buddhist philosophy, there's a concept that invites us to truly observe ourselves, mindfully and without judgment, so we can understand the habits that keep us stuck in patterns that no longer serve us. As we get older, this awareness becomes even more crucial, because just like the lotus that rises out of the muddy waters, we too can rise above habits that no longer reflect our truest, most vibrant selves. In today's video, we'll explore 6 common aging habits that, over time, can quietly chip away at our energy, confidence, and sense of connection. These aren't just physical habits. They touch on the emotional and mental aspects of how we carry ourselves through life. But don't worry, there's always room for growth and change. Just as the Buddha taught us that transformation comes from within, it's never too late to adjust our actions and align them with peace, vitality, and balance. Stay with us, and let's dive into how we can break free from these habits and embrace the wisdom of aging gracefully, with mindfulness as our guide. 1. Neglecting personal grooming, mindfulness of the body. In Buddhism, there's a profound connection between our body, speech, and mind. The Buddha taught that our bodies are not separate from our spiritual well-being, rather they are integral to the journey of mindfulness. When our body is cared for, the mind follows suit, calm, composed, and centered. The famous saying, "When the body is at peace, the mind follows," encapsulates this wisdom. But what happens when we neglect this essential care? When we overlook the simple daily practices of grooming, it's often a reflection of something deeper, the neglect of self-care in other parts of our lives. Let me tell you the story of Thich Minh, a revered monk who spent his entire life meditating, teaching, and embracing the Buddhist path of detachment. His dedication to inner peace was unmatched, and he lived with profound simplicity. As he aged, however, his robe, once crisp and pristine, began to show signs of wear. His hair too grew untamed, and the spiritual simplicity he cherished started to reflect outwardly as a kind of neglect. Thich Minh was so absorbed in his meditation practice, so focused on the impermanence of life, that he overlooked the connection between a well-maintained body and his state of mind. One day, a younger monk approached him with great respect and said, "Thich Minh, the life you live is one of wisdom and peace. Yet, how can we expect to respect the present moment if we neglect the body entrusted to us?" This moment, though simple, was a revelation. It wasn't about vanity or external appearances. It was about showing respect to the life he had been given and recognizing that physical neglect can weigh heavily on the mind. Thich Minh then began to engage more in self-care, even if it was as simple as trimming his hair or ensuring his robe was neat. These small, mindful acts connected him back to the present moment. He realized that just as we commit to daily meditation, we must also commit to daily self-care, ensuring balance between our body and our mind. It's through this mindfulness of the body that we awaken a greater sense of harmony and self-respect. The simple act of grooming became a practice of mindfulness, grounding him in the now. Take a moment to reflect on this. Think about the last time you paid close attention to your grooming. Perhaps, like Thich Minh, you've neglected these small acts in the name of spiritual growth or the busy demands of life. But imagine how a simple change, trimming your hair, moisturizing your skin, or wearing clothes that fit well, could shift your energy. These acts are not merely physical, but are linked to how we present ourselves to the world. When we show that we value our bodies, we also show respect for our lives, and in turn, for the present moment. This practice of mindfulness extends far beyond appearances. It is a reflection of how we care for ourselves in every aspect of life. As the Buddha taught, the body is the temple of the mind. So by attending to our body's needs, through grooming, care, and respect, we awaken a deeper sense of balance and mindfulness in our hearts. Each time we care for our body, we remind ourselves that we are worthy of love and attention, and in doing so, we create a stronger connection between our inner world and outer expression. 2. Speaking too loudly. The importance of mindful communication. As we age, our bodies go through subtle shifts, many of which we might not immediately notice. Changes in our posture, our memory, and even our hearing. In Buddhism, mindful communication holds great significance, as it is seen as a direct reflection of our inner peace. The Buddha once said, "Speech should be used for the benefit of others." Communication isn't just about talking. It's about contributing to the harmony around us, fostering mutual understanding and compassion. But when our hearing begins to fade, we may inadvertently change how we communicate, which can affect how others perceive us. Let's consider the story of Layla, an elderly woman who had always been a vibrant presence in her community. She had lived a long life, full of wisdom and stories, but recently she noticed a shift. As her hearing diminished, her conversations became louder. Without realizing it, she started interrupting others, her voice rising in an effort to be heard over the noise. She never meant to dominate the conversation, but that's exactly how it began to feel to those around her. One quiet evening, while sitting with her family, her grandson gently said, "Grandma, I love listening to your stories, but your voice is a bit loud today. Maybe we can talk a little softer." Layla, taken aback by his words, felt a wave of surprise mixed with a touch of embarrassment. Had I really been speaking so loudly? She thought. In that moment, she realized something profound. Her efforts to be heard were, in fact, pushing people away. She had become so focused on ensuring her voice was heard that she lost sight of the very essence of communication, connection. In Buddhist practice, we are taught that the first step to understanding others is through the art of listening. The Buddha emphasized that listening is a practice of deep mindfulness. It's not about hearing words and immediately responding. It's about truly being present with the speaker, absorbing their words without judgment, and understanding their heart. Layla's grandson's gentle nudge was a reminder that mindful communication is as much about listening as it is about speaking. As Layla pondered the Buddha's teachings, she realized that she had been so caught up in the act of speaking that she had forgotten the delicate balance between speaking and listening. To truly communicate, one must hold space for others to speak, creating a dialogue that flows naturally. Mindful communication means speaking with clarity and purpose, but it also means listening deeply, without interruption, and allowing others the opportunity to share their thoughts. This insight shifted Layla's perspective. The next time she joined a conversation, she consciously lowered her volume and made an effort to listen more attentively. She found that as she became more aware of her speech, she also became more connected with her loved ones. Conversations felt smoother, more harmonious. Her family no longer felt like they had to compete with her voice. They could simply be present with each other. In Buddhism, the teachings on speech and communication encourage us to use our words wisely, to choose kindness and compassion in every interaction. As we age, our voice is not just an extension of our body, but of our mind and heart. When we speak mindfully, we invite understanding and connection, creating a space where everyone feels heard and respected. The beauty of mindful communication lies in its simplicity. When we speak with awareness, not only do we enrich our relationships, but we also bring a sense of peace to ourselves and those around us. As we age, Cultivating this mindfulness in our speech can become a powerful tool in maintaining strong, compassionate connections, ensuring that our presence continues to be a source of warmth and harmony. 3. Wearing outdated or ill-fitting clothes. Embrace of simplicity and presentability. In Buddhism, simplicity is not only celebrated, it's revered. The Buddha himself wore simple robes that allowed him to move freely without attachment to worldly desires. His robes were not signs of neglect. They were symbols of clarity, of purpose, and of the impermanence of life. His simplicity wasn't about avoiding self-care or neglecting the physical world. It was about shedding unnecessary layers of attachment so he could focus on the essence of being. This idea of simplicity, then, can be applied to how we present ourselves in the world. It's not about the quantity or the extravagance of our clothing, but the quality of how we wear it and the intention behind it. Consider the story of George, a kind-hearted elderly man who had once been known for his sharp, well-kept appearance. George had always taken pride in his style. He wore clothes that fit well and looked fresh, which not only made him feel good, but also drew positive attention from others. But as the years passed, something shifted. The once neat clothes began to fade. The shirts that once fit comfortably now hung loose on his body. His trousers were no longer as sharp as they had once been. He justified this by telling himself that it no longer mattered as much. After all, he was growing older, and what did it matter if his clothes were a little outdated? But over time, George began to feel the weight of those worn-out clothes, not physically, but emotionally. When he looked in the mirror, the image staring back at him didn't feel vibrant, didn't feel like the man he had been. He started to feel disconnected from himself, as if the clothes he wore symbolized a deeper neglect of his own well-being. One day, as he went out to the market, an old friend spotted him. After a warm hug, his friend, with a gentle smile, said, "George, I haven't seen you wear that shirt in years. I miss seeing you looking sharp." That simple remark lingered in George's mind. He had once taken great care in how he dressed, not out of vanity, but because it made him feel strong and purposeful. He realized that, in his efforts to simplify, he had let go of something important, the act of presenting himself with respect, both to others and to himself. His clothes were not just fabric, they were a reflection of his internal state. So, George decided to make a small but significant change. He began by replacing his old baggy shirts with well-fitting, comfortable clothes that allowed him to feel at ease, but also confident. He didn't chase trends or focus on fashion for fashion's sake. Instead, he chose garments that were practical, clean, and reflected his inner self-respect. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to shift his energy. When he looked in the mirror now, he saw a man who cared for himself, who respected the life he had been given, and who was still vibrant and full of purpose. Buddhist teachings often remind us that our outer appearance is a reflection of our inner state. When we dress mindfully, it's not about impressing others or putting on a facade. It's about aligning ourselves with the present moment. The act of wearing clothes that fit, that are clean, and that reflect our self-respect is an act of mindfulness. We invite positive energy into our lives when we present ourselves with clarity, simplicity, and intention. George's story is a reminder that the clothes we wear don't define us, but they certainly influence how we feel about ourselves and how we engage with the world. There's no need for extravagance, no need to keep up with the latest trends. All we need is to dress with mindfulness, to choose garments that make us feel grounded and connected to who we truly are. When we do, we don't just wear clothes, we wear our confidence, our self-respect, and our clarity. And that, in the end, is what the Buddha taught us: to wear simplicity with purpose and grace, to let go of what doesn't serve us, and to embrace the present moment fully, in both body and spirit. 4. Complaining too much. The practice of contentment and gratitude. As we grow older, it's not uncommon to find ourselves slipping into the habit of complaining. The world around us changes. The younger generations seem to be moving at a pace we no longer understand, and sometimes it feels like everything we once knew is slipping away. We've earned the right to express our frustrations, right? But the Buddha warned us about the dangers of negative speech. Complaining, even when rooted in valid concerns, becomes a way of focusing on what we don't have, what's missing, or what we wish were different. And in focusing on these things, we inadvertently create more suffering, not just for ourselves, but for those around us as well. Take, for example, the story of Suki, a woman who had lived a full life. She'd seen the world change in ways that sometimes left her feeling confused, isolated, and frustrated. Society was moving too fast. Technology was advancing in ways she didn't quite understand, and her beloved neighborhood, once quiet and peaceful, was now bustling with new faces and unfamiliar noise. Suki often found herself voicing her discontent, expressing how she missed the good old days and how everything seemed to be going wrong. Her family, though understanding, began to grow distant, and her friends often avoided long conversations with her. Suki felt increasingly alienated, her complaints a constant reminder of how things had changed, and not for the better, in her eyes. One day, as Suki sat quietly in her garden, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon, she remembered a teaching from the Buddha: "It is not what happens to us that matters, but how we respond." This simple yet profound teaching struck her like a sudden light in the darkness. She had spent so much of her time focusing on what was wrong, on what she couldn't change, that she had forgotten the power she had in how she chose to respond to those challenges. With a deep breath, Suki decided to shift her focus. She would no longer allow herself to dwell on the complaints that had begun to dominate her thoughts. Instead, she would practice gratitude. Every day she would pause and reflect on 3 things she was grateful for: the warmth of the sun on her face, the love of her family surrounding her, and the simple beauty of the flowers in her garden. At first, it felt awkward. She had grown so accustomed to complaining that to focus on the good seemed almost unnatural. But Suki persisted. She wrote down her gratitude each morning and made it a ritual. Slowly, as the days passed, she began to feel a subtle change within herself. Her energy, once heavy with negativity, began to lighten. She found that her mood had shifted, her outlook transformed. She noticed the warmth in her family's responses when she greeted them with a smile instead of a complaint. Conversations became easier, more joyful, and less draining. The burden of negativity that had once weighed her down had begun to lift, replaced by a sense of peace and appreciation for the present moment. In Buddhism, the practice of gratitude is seen as a powerful tool for maintaining peace of mind. By focusing on what is good, what we already have, rather than what we lack, we open ourselves up to joy, connection, and love. Gratitude shifts our perspective, allowing us to find beauty and abundance, even in the simplest moments. Suki had learned that while change was inevitable, her response to it was within her control. By embracing gratitude, she not only changed her own energy, but also influenced those around her, creating a ripple effect of positivity. Suki's story is a reminder that we are not bound by our circumstances. Yes, the world will continue to change, and challenges will always arise, but how we respond to them defines our experience. By choosing gratitude over complaint, we free ourselves from the chains of negativity, opening ourselves to a life of greater peace, contentment, and connection. 5. Ignoring posture and body language, cultivating strength in presence. The Buddha, in his timeless wisdom, taught that mindfulness extends far beyond our thoughts. It encompasses our entire being, including how we carry ourselves physically. The way we present ourselves through body language is a direct reflection of our inner state. When we slouch or move without intention, we may be unconsciously expressing a lack of self-awareness or a disconnection between our mind and body. Yet, when we hold ourselves with presence and purpose, it speaks volumes about how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. Take the story of Sam, a 75-year-old man who had always been active, full of energy, and ready for the next adventure. For years, he had maintained a robust lifestyle, enjoying walks in the park, long hikes, and the satisfaction of a well-lived day. But as time went on, something began to change. He started to notice himself walking slower, more cautiously, and with less purpose. His back, once straight and proud, began to curve slightly, and his steps became shorter. Though he still had the same vibrant mind, his body seemed to reflect a quiet resignation, as if age had quietly claimed him. One evening, Sam sat down to read a passage from the Dhammapada, the Buddha's collection of teachings. The words he read seemed to resonate deep within him. Let the body be steady, the mind be still. It was as if those words had awakened something dormant inside him. The Buddha's teachings were not just about cultivating stillness in the mind, but also in the body. To be truly present in life, Sam realized, his body too must be aligned with his inner sense of peace. With renewed resolve, Sam decided to change his posture and how he carried himself. Instead of shuffling along with his head down, he began to lift his feet with intention, walking as though every step had purpose. He straightened his back, feeling the muscles in his spine lengthen, and focused on making eye contact with those around him. It was subtle at first, just a small shift in how he stood and moved, but it was enough to create a profound change. Not only did Sam feel stronger, more energized, but others began to treat him with greater respect. His posture conveyed a sense of strength and vitality that they hadn't seen in him for a while. He no longer seemed frail or disengaged, but instead vibrant, confident, and present. The act of walking with intention, of standing tall, of making purposeful eye contact, these simple actions sent a message that Sam was still very much involved in life. Not a passive observer, but an active participant. In Buddhism, our physical presence is often seen as a reflection of our inner mindfulness. The way we carry ourselves communicates our thoughts, feelings, and our connection to the world. Just as a peaceful mind requires an attentive practice, so too does our body need care and mindfulness. When we let our posture slip, it can be a sign that we are disconnecting from the present moment, from our own strength. But when we consciously choose to sit up straight, to walk with purpose, we honor the body that carries us through this life and create a balance between our outer world and our inner world. Sam's story is a powerful reminder that our body is not just a vessel, it is an extension of our mind. How we choose to carry ourselves reflects the respect we have for our own lives, for our bodies, and for the present moment. By taking a few simple steps to align our physical presence with our mental and emotional state, we cultivate not only strength, but also a deep sense of inner peace and connection with the world. It is through our posture, our body language, and our movements that we can manifest the mindfulness and presence that the Buddha so often spoke of. 6. Bad breath or body odor. The path to purity and self-care. As we grow older, the changes in our bodies become more apparent, sometimes in ways we don't expect. While many of us may notice graying hair or wrinkles, there are subtler shifts that can easily be overlooked, such as changes in our body odor or breath. Aging can affect our body's natural processes, and one of those is the way we smell. But in Buddhist philosophy, purity, both physical and mental, is vital. The Buddha's teachings emphasize cleanliness as a way to honor our body, the vessel that carries us through this life. Taking care of our body is not merely about appearance. It's about showing gratitude for the life we've been given and for the precious time we have left. Consider the story of Frank, a lively 78-year-old man who had always been the heart of every social gathering. He was known for his quick wit, his hearty laugh, and his ability to engage anyone in a deep conversation. But over time, Frank began to notice something troubling. His friends, who once eagerly sought his company, started to distance themselves. Conversations grew shorter, and he could sense a shift in the warmth he used to feel in his interactions. At first, Frank couldn't understand why this was happening. He was still the same person, still full of stories, still eager to share. But one day, while he was chatting with his daughter, she gently mentioned that he might want to try a new mouthwash and drink more water. At first, Frank was taken aback. Was something wrong with my breath? He wondered. He had always prided himself on his ability to maintain his grooming habits, but it hadn't occurred to him that, with age, his body's natural balance had shifted. His breath and body odor had become something he wasn't aware of, and it was subtly affecting his relationships. Frank, ever willing to take advice from his daughter, began to practice a little more self-care. He started by staying better hydrated and incorporating mouthwash into his daily routine. He also paid closer attention to his clothing, making sure that his clothes were always fresh and clean, and he added some extra focus on his personal hygiene. These small, thoughtful acts of self-care seemed trivial at first, but they began to make a world of difference. Not only did he feel better about himself, but his interactions with others changed as well. Slowly, Frank began to regain the warmth in his relationships. His friends no longer backed away when he spoke, and they once again embraced his presence with the same enthusiasm as before. In Buddhism, self-care is never seen as an act of vanity or selfishness. Rather, it is an act of loving kindness toward ourselves and the people we interact with. The Buddha taught us that when we care for our physical body, we honor it as the precious temple it is. Maintaining cleanliness and personal hygiene isn't just about appearance. It's about fostering a sense of well-being, both internally and externally. It allows us to engage more fully with life and with others, and it radiates outward, affecting those around us. Frank's story is a reminder that we are not just responsible for our physical health, but for the way we present ourselves to the world. By tending to the little things, whether it's staying hydrated, using mouthwash, or wearing clean clothes, we demonstrate self-respect and invite others to connect with us in a positive and meaningful way. It is through these small acts of self-care that we not only improve our own lives, but also the lives of those we interact with. In Buddhism, we are taught that purity is a path to peace. When we take care of ourselves, when we live in harmony with our body, we align ourselves with the natural order of life, and in doing so, we cultivate a life of balance, mindfulness, and respect for ourselves and for those around us. Closing thoughts. As we journey through life, aging becomes not just a matter of time passing, but a reflection of how we choose to present ourselves, both physically and emotionally. The subtle habits we develop, the way we carry ourselves, the energy we project, these all shape not only how we experience life, but also how others experience us. The teachings of mindfulness remind us that each moment is an opportunity for transformation, no matter our age. It's never too late to embrace change, to nurture ourselves with the care and attention we deserve. By recognizing the habits that no longer serve us and replacing them with practices that align with the wisdom of mindfulness, we can create a life filled with peace, connection, and vitality. The small shifts, whether in how we speak, how we carry our bodies, or how we care for ourselves, can ripple through our lives, creating a profound impact. Remember, the path to transformation is always available to us, and it's never about perfection, it's about progress, about making the conscious choice to step forward with intention. Just as the lotus rises from the mud, so too can we rise above the challenges of aging, embracing each moment with grace and mindfulness. If you found value in today's video and feel inspired to continue walking this path of self-awareness, I invite you to subscribe to Quiet Wisdom and join this community of like-minded individuals. Together, let's share in the journey of creating lives filled with peace, balance, and self-respect. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the next video.